Welcome to the fifth and final part of this introduction to Kant's ethics. In this episode, we will look at some important advantages and disadvantages of Kant's ethics. But first, a short recap of the content from the last videos. According to Kant, man is both a rational being and a sensory being. However, Kant clearly gives priority to reason. Only actions from duty are moral, because here only reason, pure respect for the moral law, determines the human will. The moral law corresponds to the categorical imperative. Kant formulates the categorical imperative in various formulas. Two formulas are particularly important. First, the universal law formula. Act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. This formula is about whether subjective rules of action, maxims, can be generalized. And secondly, the end in itself formula. Act in such a way that you always use humanity, both in your person and in the person of everyone else, as an end in itself, never merely as a means. Because people are autonomous, because they can make laws for themselves and obey them, they have dignity and must not be instrumentalized. What are the advantages and disadvantages of Kant's ethics? Let's start with the advantages. Because the categorical imperative is purely formal and has no concrete content, it can be applied to any situation. This becomes particularly clear in the universal law formula of the categorical imperative. I don't have to think back and forth for a long time, get all kinds of information about the situation, or calculate short and long-term consequences, which are uncertain anyway. I just have to ask myself the question, can I want my subjective rule of action, my maxim, to become a universal law that applies always, everywhere, and for everyone? If the answer is yes, my planned action is moral. If the answer is no, it is not. The end in itself formula of the categorical imperative provides a further advantage. It protects human dignity. This means that every person, regardless of gender, skin color, age, and so on, must always be treated as an end in itself, and never just as a means. It is not for nothing that Kant is considered one of the most important founders of human rights, of rights that people only have on the basis of their humanity and for no other reason. Furthermore, this formula protects minorities, whose lives or physical integrity must not be set off against the happiness of the majority or some supposedly higher goal. Such formal, rational ethics make objective decisions possible. By excluding all subjective drives, such as inclinations, feelings, etc., these are not only free of egoism, but are also not determined by religion or a prevailing ideology, as was common at the time. Reason alone determines which actions are morally right, not a god, a ruler, or an emotion. But it is precisely this complete ignoring of feelings that is one of the most important criticisms of Kant's ethics. Representatives of emotional ethics, such as Hume or Schopenhauer, emphasize the essential role of feelings for moral action. In their opinion, it is precisely moral feelings that motivate people to behave correctly. People also find it very difficult to ignore their needs, wishes, and feelings when making decisions. In this context, Friedrich Schiller said of Kant's ethics, "I gladly serve my friends, but unfortunately I do it with inclination, and so it often grieves me that I am not virtuous." Here he criticizes Kant's view that only actions from duty, in which reason alone determines the human will, are moral. Moreover, Kant's ethics contradict people's moral intuition and is therefore counterintuitive. To act completely against one's inclinations, that is out of duty, seems almost inhuman. We have seen this problem with Alex's mother, who betrays her son to the drug dealers. Similar examples are often used to portray Kant's ethics as unrealistic. Another point of criticism is the conflict of duties, the problem that two duties would be morally required but cannot be realized at the same time. We also saw this problem with Alex's mother. After all, doesn't a mother have a moral duty to protect her son rather than tell the truth to some criminal drug dealers? Kant's argument that perfect duties take precedence over imperfect ones does not really convince such critics. Furthermore, it can be criticized that Kant completely excludes possible consequences of actions. This not only seems unrealistic, but is also becoming increasingly explosive in view of global challenges with far-reaching implications for the future. According to Kant's critics, the long-term consequences of our actions for future generations must be taken into account in view of the global problems of the present. This is why Hans Jonas formulated a new categorical imperative in the 20th century. And finally, criticism can be leveled at the basis of Kant's ethics. The question can be asked, and recent brain research does this quite vehemently, whether free will, which forms the basis of Kant's entire philosophical system, exists at all. If the answer here is no, then man is not autonomous, but determined. Then they cannot act freely and rationally. Are you convinced by Kant's ethics? Would you like to try out the categorical imperative in everyday life? Or do you see more difficulties and find yourself on the critical side? Feel free to leave a comment with your personal opinion or tell us about your experiences testing out Kant's ethics.